Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the third video. Good to have you here. Today we're going to look at a really interesting topic. We're going to look at a study that basically shows how we can utilize constructionist structures to get our students able to use tricky sentence structures quickly and better. I have a lot of faith in this study that we're going to look at today. But first, really quickly on sentence structures. So sentence structures, you may have noticed because, you know, you're all awesome teachers, I'm sure, very perceptive people, like we all are. You must have noticed before that, you know, we've got some interesting structures in English, and most languages have this sort of situation. Like we say, tell me the problem, but we say explain the problem to me. We don't say explain me the problem, right? Or, you know, we have things like explain the problem to me, and that has a kind of like the same structure as describe the problem to me. So we have two structures here that are kind of identical. And also we can have something like give Hakan the gun, and tell me the truth, and cut Belinda a slice of that lovely carrot cake. All of these have the same construction, the same sort of structure, right? And also we have things like she kicked the ball into the goal, and she kicked the door open. Now these kind of do, but also kind of don't, but kind of do have the same structure, right? Okay. So we're going to look at this stuff today, and a paper that really gets into the nitty-gritty of this sort of these sort of very different but also sometimes very similar sentence structures in English, and the best way to teach them. So yes, there will be takeaways at the end of this video. If you want to go straight to the takeaways, probably somewhere in this frame will be some writing showing you how to do that. So let's look at the study. So today we're going to look at the study. Sorry for all the notes here. We're going to look at this study. It's called Applying Constructionist Approaches to Teaching English Argument Structure Constructions to EFL Learners from TEFL Quarterly last year. I'm going to move a little bit to the side so we can have some space for things up here. Right. Okay. I don't know where it is. Okay, this study is actually pretty awesome. I was very impressed with this one. And as you'll see later, it has yielded some pretty impressive results. But before we get into the study, we're going to want to start talking about this constructionist approach. What is this constructionist approach to language acquisition? So yeah, let's go for it. Now, originally, I was going to demonstrate everything with little pieces of plasticine. So I went out and I bought some plasticine. But turns out this isn't plasticine at all. This is some weird sort of crumbly wax stuff that's masquerading as plasticine. So you can't really stick things together with this. So we're going to have to do this with the power of words instead of the power of plasticine. Okay, here we go. So let's think about the sentence, Tatiana's going to give Hakan the gun. Okay, so one common way of looking at this sentence and even describing the sentence to English learners as teachers, we often have something like subject, be, going to, verb one, object, indirect object. So, you know, we'll have this cluster of different labels to describe this sentence. Maybe even subject, verb, object, indirect object. But the point is, as I was going to demonstrate with plasticine, we tend to sort of analyze or explain these sorts of structures in lots of little pieces, right? Let's look at a similar but different sentence. Let's look at the sentence, cry me a river, from that awful song. I'm sure lots of you like it. I apologize. I can't stand that song. Cry me a river. And again, this is an imperative. So verb first, verb one, object, article, indirect object. We can analyze this in that sort of way, this very subject, verb, object, piece by piece sort of way, and explain things to our students. But we're missing a big opportunity here. We're focusing a lot on the verb for a start. The verb is where all the action happens. But for this structure to make more sense, if we want to analyze it in terms of structure, there's a better way of doing it. So in a way, Tatiana's going to give Hakan the gun has a sort of meta meaning in common with cry me a river. They seem like different sentences, but the similar structure kind of shows us something similar is going on. And what can you really do with these pieces? Well, when they're still just pieces, if you have them labeled as subject, verb, object, it's kind of useful, but we can do better. So instead of thinking about the tense and the subjects and the verbs and the different pieces, if you have a constructionist sort of approach, you can focus on the meaning instead. So Tatiana's going to give Hakan the gun. We can say X causes Y to receive Z. Cool, makes sense. Cry me a river, X is not there because it's an imperative. X causes Y to receive Z. You cause me to cry, to get a river, to receive a river. Okay. Through the power of crying. And okay, so basically we can take all of these little pieces and we can have them as one sort of meta construction. X causes Y to receive Z, or subject, verb, object, object 2 if you want, but as one unit, not as separate pieces. You're conceiving this as one structure. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, we have this unit, but this time we're focusing on the construction. Both sentences have the same thing going on. We have one structure and so far 2 sentences. We have a full unit. And this unit, what does it mean? The X causes Y to receive Z. Well, it's X causes Y to receive Z. It's got a name. It's called the ditransitive structure. And with a constructionist approach, we take the structure and associate it with a meaning. So this sort of X causes Y to receive Z structure is all about transfer. I mean, receive and transfer. So this is the constructionist sort of view. We can replace the verb here and still have a feeling of transfer. So, Tatiana's going to give Hakan the gun. Cry me a river. This scandal will cost me the election. The scandal will cost me the election. I'll send her the film. It will guarantee us the winning number. So different verbs, same structure, same feeling of transfer. So yeah, this constructionist approach to language is basically looking at sentences and structures in a different way. Instead of thinking about the tenses and how the verb functions, we look more closely at the syntax and we see how the way that we arrange our sentences can fall into patterns that have their own sort of meta meaning. In this case, the ditransitive form represents transfer. X causes Y to receive Z. We are connecting the form and the meaning together of the structure itself, not of the words, but the structure itself has a form and its own meaning. Okay, so yeah, sorting out language into neat categories like this is always a bit dangerous, right? And we have to take everything like this with a pinch of salt. Nothing is pure. This may not work with everything. It's the same with almost every theory on language. But, we're applied linguists. Some things are helpful, and this is helpful. And as applied linguists, we want to apply our linguism, right? And this is one way we can do that. We can help our students understand these structures better by taking this constructionist approach. And yeah, the study we're looking at today focuses on teaching a group of constructionist structures called argument structure constructions. They have nothing to do with arguing, but here they are. We've got the ditransitive there already. So you'll be kind of familiar. We've all seen these structures because, we all speak English and we all teach English. Let's have a look at them one by one. Don't worry about this. there's some details here. You don't have to learn all this, but it gives you a good picture. So yeah, we've got the intransitive unergative. The child was kicking and screaming, and the form of that is basically subject verb. And the underlying meaning of this form, this structure, is X acts. Something just does something, like I'm running, or Shanti laughed. You've got the intransitive motion, which is a subject, verb, and then path or location. The ball was rolling down the hill. And the meaning of the structure is X moves, path or location. And another example could be, I don't know, I bumped into the table. You've also got the intransitive resultive, which is a subject verb complement. The water froze solid. And that's basically X becomes Y state. And actually, I couldn't find any other examples of this. Really, it was quite difficult. Obviously, this is quite a rare structure. If you have any, if you can think of any, please leave some in the comments, especially if you know this constructionist stuff better than me. If you've looked at this in more detail, I'd love to hear some examples of the intransitive resultive. Exciting stuff. You got transitive, which is your subject, verb, object. Classic example given as a sentence in English. Tom kicked the ball. X acts on Y. Or I'm stroking my cat. Caused motion. Subject, verb, object, path, location. Tom kicked the ball into the goalpost. X causes Y to move, Z path, location. Things like he dragged her to the garden centre. You got our ditransitive that we looked at earlier. Subject, verb, object, object two. Tom kicked Ranjit a ball. X causes Y to receive Z. Another example, pass me the salt, please, for example. And you've got the resultative. Subject, verb, object, resultative phrase. Tom kicked the door open. X causes Y to become Z state. She kicked the door open. That chili pepper knocked me unconscious. And okay, I went into detail quite a lot here. You don't need to study this. You get an idea. You have this connection between meaning and form, but not the meaning of the words, the meaning of the structure. The point here is that the different way of looking at these, instead of just focusing on the form, we're equating form, but not getting bogged down in the verb forms, and relating it, and this is crucial, relating it to a meaning. X causes Y to become Z state, or X causes Y to move Z path. Okay, so that's constructionist stuff. Let's look at the study. So yeah, what did they do? What did they do in the study? Good question. In this study, Kim and Ra wanted to answer these two research questions. Here they are. Does constructionist-based instruction facilitate EFL students' sentence production ability to a greater extent than conventional grammar instruction? Or in other words, is a constructionist approach better than normal approaches? 2, is presenting target constructions as a network more effective than focusing on individual constructions separately? That's a good question, isn't it? So yeah, that network thing, we'll look at that in detail later. But I think it's a great part of this study, if you ask me. Okay, so this is what they did. They took 51 subjects, all mid to high intermediate adult Korean-speaking learners of English. They all got 8 weeks of instruction on the target language, and the target language was the argument structures we went through just a minute ago. The subjects were then divided into 3 groups. Group 1 and Group 2 got given construction-based instruction, accompanied with images and animations. So for example, when they were teaching the intransitive motion structure, like the ball rolled down the hill, the structure was explained in this constructionist way. Remember this form and meaning of the form. So you have the form, mover, action, direction, goal, and the meaning, X moves, Y path, location. And then they have some example sentences. And then they showed some, what they called animations, but what to me certainly looked like videos. And they showed these videos to the students, to the subjects, and they showed them this sort of action in action. So videos depicting the action in the structure, videos depicting the example sentences, very straightforward stuff. But I just want to pause here and ask, what's going on with this one? This is a screenshot from the video they used for the sentence, "The woman gets out of the tent," to instruct the intransitive motion structure. I just found it a very weird image, and good. Weird's good. We remember weird. Weird's a good way to make people remember things. So yeah, old woman getting out of tent. So anyway, you get the point. Show them the images, show them the video, present the language, and I guess this is the key point, present the language matching the structure. Mover, action, direction, goal, and the meaning, X moves, Y path, location, for example. Okay, always making that connection between the structure and the meaning. The idea here is that the learners are thinking about this in a very surface way. They're not getting bogged down in the details of the grammar. They're looking at it in a very meta way. And in a way, it's kind of easier to relate to as a result. And in the words of Goldberg, who was a pioneer of this constructionist approach, this approach takes a what you see is what you get angle. Here's the structure. This is what it means. That's all you need to know. And that's good. We stop freaking out about prepositions and verbs and articles because we're focusing on the structure, not what most people would call the grammar. Okay, so far, so good. So what's group? So yeah, that's group 1 and group 2. They get this constructionist sort of approach to learning the structures. The differences between group 1 and group 2, well as receiving the constructionist instruction, group 2 also got this network thing, presenting the construction in a network. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, basically, instead of just getting each construction separately, here's the intransitive motion, here's how to form it, here's what it means, here's a woman getting out of a tent. They also got the opportunity to compare and contrast similar structures. So for example, you've got 2 intransitive structures like the ball was rolling down the hill and the water froze solid, and you can compare these to the transitive structures. They have a transitive equivalent, right? The ball was rolling down the hill and then he kicked the ball into the goalpost. And you can compare the structures and see what's going on. And you've got the water froze solid and she kicked the door open. Basically giving students a chance to look at them together and see how they kind of function in relation to each other. They did this, by the way, by showing 2 images next to each other. One had a person walking into a room, accompanied by the sentence, "I walked into a room." And the other with the same person, but this time being pushed by someone into the room, accompanied by the sentence, "My sister pushed me into the room." And they could compare the meaning through the pictures and the structures through the language. Another example has the respondents looking at a picture of someone getting angry and another picture of someone getting angry because his sister is ridiculing him. I don't know how they can portray that in an image. They didn't provide any images of that, but somehow they have those 2 things as an image. And also they really got something against sisters who are constantly pushing people into rooms and aggravating people in this study. But there we go. So they get the chance to compare the structures. You get the idea here. The respondents were also able to see how the structures shifted from intransitive to transitive. They could see how the motion-oriented structures, like she kicked the ball into the goal, were similar to the resultative ones. She kicked the door open. They're very similar, right? Making connections, finding similarities and differences. And this reminded me, when I read this section of the study, it reminded me of a very good book called Make It Stick. It's by Peter C. Brown, Henry D. Rodiger III, seriously? Okay. And Mark A. McDaniel. It covers loads of research in cognitive psychology and basically provides takeaways on how to learn better and more effectively. Every teacher and student perhaps should read this book, frankly. I think it's a very, very valuable piece of sort of meta research. And I'm not endorsed by their publisher or anything. This is a genuine recommendation. Yeah, and one of the big takeaways of this research is that if we interweave the practice of one skill or topic with another, we learn better, making connections. And that's basically what's going on with the group 2 in this study. The topic area is fairly narrow, but the same principle is going on. Making connections between different concepts strengthens our learning. Okay, so let's recap. You've got group 1 that are getting constructivist-oriented instruction. The ball rolled down the hill equals subject verb path location equals X moves Y path location, accompanied by images and animations, like the old woman getting out of a small tent. You've got group 2 who get all of that, plus some images and sentences allowing them to compare the similar structures and hopefully allowing them to find more patterns. And group 3, well, we didn't talk about group 3 yet. That's because that was the control group. It was the baseline group. The interaction for this group was pretty simple and probably quite familiar. They basically got classic subject, verb, object style explanations, focusing on form. So with the sentence, the boy put the ball in the basket, their boring example, by the way, not mine. I don't do boring examples. The boy put the ball in the basket. The explanation is that subject is followed by verb, which is followed by the object, which is followed by place, and that you can do this structure with verbs like put, take, and place. And that's it. Like, no old women crawling out of small tents for these guys, and certainly no sort of relationship between structure and like meta meaning. Okay, so that's it. You got the 3 groups. And what about the results? Well, that's the study, and the results were pretty good. We'll get to those in just a second. Before all of this started, the subjects did a pre-test on the target language, so we could see where the groups were. And after the study, they did 2 post-tests. One was just 2 weeks after the 8-week course, and another one was 7 weeks after the 8-week course. The post-test consisted of a basic translation task, translating the structures into English directly, and a guided writing task where they're shown images and have to write what's going on. Like, I'm guessing a picture of a ball rolling down a hill and eliciting the balls rolling down the hill, or something like that, and so on. Okay, and the results. Let's talk about the results. The results were awesome. Really, really, really they were. They were fairly conclusive. Here they are. As you can see, this is quite a conclusive experiment. The 2 groups with the constructionist explanations, including the old woman getting out of a small tent, did much better. And if we remember the hypothesis questions, let's look at them. Does construction-based instruction facilitate EFL students' production ability to a greater extent than the conventional grammar instruction? And the second one, is presenting target constructions as a network more effective than focusing on individual constructions separately? We can basically answer both of these questions with a confident, maybe not quite resounding, but a confident yes. Yes, it does. Or yes, it is, depending if you're answering the first or the second question. So yeah, here are lovely, lovely, lovely results. Okay, unsurprisingly, the authors of the study conclude by confirming their assumptions that creating a high connection between construction structures with images and animations and using the constructionist approach to instruction for these structures is effective for short and long-term retention. Of course they did, because that's what the results showed. But, let's talk very quickly about the limitations of this study. It's solid results, but of course, like any study, there are limitations. There's always limitations. They were comparing the constructionist approach with a very basic focus on form approach. So we don't really know how this compares with other approaches like the discovery method or lexical learning or even plain old grammar translation method. we don't know how well constructionists would approach would compare to them. Also, the target language here really, really lends itself to this approach. You know, we're looking at structures. But if we're learning things like soft skills for a meeting or ways of talking about asking for permission, this might not be so smooth. A lot depends on what kind of language you're teaching. But I don't think that matters too much, as long as you realize that the takeaways here are applicable to teaching these kinds of structures. Then I think it's okay. It is certainly useful. So let's look at some takeaways. What do you want to walk away with from this video? This is the part of the video you should have jumped to at the beginning of the video if you were lazy or didn't have time. It's okay to be lazy, and also who has time these days? So in short, my big takeaway is basically do what they did in the study. It seemed to have worked, right? Teach the constructions as constructions, and constructions that also have underlying meaning, and also use images as much as you can. We're going to look at a couple of fun examples in these takeaways. So here are the 3 big takeaways from this study, according to me, in my opinion. 1, using images to help learning is effective. I think pictures and the videos of old women crawling out of small tents really helped the participants get such impressive scores in the post-tests. 2, the constructionist-oriented instruction focuses a lot on the meaning of the structure rather than just a plain old structure. I like this whole X makes Y do Z kind of approach to describing structures. It's more grounded in reality, and as a result, I think it's more accessible to our students than, you know, subject, verb, object, indirect object. That's more weird and unhuman, if you will. So yeah, avoid single pieces, try and get it all into one sort of meaning, meta meaning. And this way, and this is what I thought was the most fascinating part of this whole constructionist thing, you can take something familiar and easy for your students, a sentence like, Hakan gave me the gun, and see how newer, more abstract verbs which use the same form can just slot in. So you've got Hakan gave me the gun, but you've also got the scandal cost me the election, or can you cry me a river, or could you cut me a slice of cake, please? And, you know, we can get a bit more abstract and a bit more advanced with the same structure. And they can do that because they all have the same general sense of transfer. So yeah, I think that's a big takeaway, that we can take something familiar and use it to advance our students. It's not just vocabulary, it's like mastery of sentence forms. Finally, point 3, takeaway 3, comparing and contrasting. This networking thing, it's very valuable. I think we should always be on the lookout for opportunities to show students how something new is like something familiar, just like I kind of just described with the different verbs. If they see he explained the problem to me and are having problems getting that right, often saying he explained me the problem, then showing them that explain works in the same way as give, because it's all a kind of transfer. And this will help them out with their meta-awareness, and maybe will get rid of fossilized errors and things like that much more quickly. And yeah, final thoughts on this. When I was reading this study, I was constantly reminded of the lexical approach and what Mike Lewis, the founder of the lexical approach, calls pattern grammar. Now, I'm not going to get into details here. I'm going to do a video on lexical learning at some point in the future because I love it. But it's interesting to see how different approaches, like a constructionist approach, and a lexical learning approach, can reach similar conclusions and end up describing language in a similar or even the same way. We have these structures that all fit into some sort of pattern. Helping our students uncover those patterns will help them use them better and with less effort, and give them this mastery. Both lexical learning and constructionist approaches both sort of posit that concept, that notion. And yeah, and even thinking about, this is going to be a bit of a hot take, but even thinking about the last video I did, on language as metaphor, we can see that things like she kicked the door open can be abstractly conceived in a similar way to she kicked the door to pieces. Open and to pieces are, in a way, metaphors of each other. Maybe that's a bit much. Maybe that's a bit deep, too philosophical. But yeah, we can really like start thinking in quite interesting ways once we open ourselves up with this constructionist approach. Yeah, that was a bit too deep though. But yeah, if you have any thoughts on this, if it's given you any ideas, if you disagree with anything, write them in the comments. I like having conversations in the YouTube comments. The last video brought some interesting topics up. Hope this one does too. And yeah, as usual, thanks. It's YouTube, so I am like legally obliged to say, oh, like and subscribe, yo, like and subscribe. But you know, you can, that would be nice. But more importantly, see if you can take something from this video into your classroom and improve the world with constructionist approaches. Let's see how that goes. Thanks very much. And yes, I'm looking forward to the next video. Until then, ciao for now.